Welcome to the Franchise Whispering Podcast, brought to you by Franchise Marketing News. I am Bob McKay, your podcast host, and so excited to have Zack Oates today, the CEO of Ovation. We'll be diving into franchise restaurants, keeping customers. So, Zack, I know you're a busy person. Thanks so much for showing up.
Yeah, Bob. For you, absolutely. Happy to be here.
That is great. So, we'll jump right into it and that type of thing right now. And, the one thing I have come to understand about the restaurant business is you can make the greatest slice of pizza the world has ever seen. And if you don't execute on 82 other things, you'll go bankrupt. And, you know, tell me what you're seeing from your purview. It's a complicated business.
Oh my gosh. And I would say there's probably over 2,000 different things that need to happen for that pizza to be served correctly. I mean, you look at every little piece of that. I mean, from how they, all the way to like how they make the pepperoni, growing the tomatoes. There's just like the distribution, getting it there, the right people, the right training. There are so many things that have to go into that. And then what happens? I order a pepperoni and I get a pepperoni with onions and it ruins my day. And every other 2,000 things that went correctly are irrelevant because me as the guest, I only care that I ordered a pepperoni pizza and I didn't get a pepperoni pizza the way that I wanted it. And so that's part of the problem, is that the expectations are not equal to the effort that's required to meet those expectations, right? It seems like, how hard is it to get a pepperoni pizza? And we're over here on the restaurant side of things being like, it's actually kind of hard. Like, there's a lot of things that are going into this. So many opportunities for mistakes, so many opportunities for, a squeeze of pricing. And, for us to have to raise prices and take price because, commodities are changing, gas prices are going up. And so that changes, what does it cost to get a US Foods delivery? And like, all of these things are going into the fact that you're trying to just get the right food to the right person. Now, that's like table stakes. You need to have amazing food and do it consistently well if you want to survive. The next level, though, is how do you really thrive? And that comes down to hospitality, right? That's where you're building connections with a guest. That's where a guest cares about you because they know that you care about them. That's where they're thinking about you for catering orders, where the Friday night rolls around. What do we want? Yeah, I want Bob's Pizza. Like, those are the things that really affect how a business grows and whether or not your location as a franchisee is going to be successful, because it's not just, hey, I'm going to push this button and everything's going to work out because this brand is successful. I see people who have okay brands that they've bought into that are crushing it. I've seen people who have amazing brands just on fire and they're losing their shorts, right? It's like there's so much control that franchisees have over the success of their location, not based on where it is, not based on where it's at, not based on the logo or what the, corporate is or is not doing. It's based on how they treat people, both their team and their customers.
No, that's so interesting. And on that, it's like, I think there is an interesting dynamic when, kind of any business you're in, you kind of just are granularly into that business. But in the franchise restaurant space and in the franchise space all around, you're really not compared against, well, you are compared against your competitors, but you're really compared against the Amazons of the world, the Apples of the world, the Netflix of the world. That frictionless that you want it now, and you get exactly what you want, is a dynamic that those are very, very high expectations. So how do you see that kind of aspect filtering into the competitive nature of business?
I think we can sit here and complain all we want about how unreasonable guests are being, but there's a little book right behind me, and it's called Unreasonable Hospitality, right?
Yeah, great
And
one.
so we could sit down and be like, oh, guests are being unreasonable. Like, their expectations are way too high. But guess what? No one is going to change that. So you can either deal with it, figure it out, or you can get caught up in the wave and be passed by. The expectations are changing. They're higher than they ever have been. And they're higher than they ever have been because guess what? The switching costs have never been lower. It is no longer a, man, I don't want to drive to the next town over to eat at a different pizza place. This is a one swipe of my finger and boom, I'm going to go. It's not like, hey, I remember this number for the pizza place and I don't want to pull out the white or the yellow pages to go find a new pizza place, right? And so the fact is, like, the expectations have just every single year gone up. And especially after COVID, they're going up and they're still continuing to rise because nowadays what's happening, there's so many innovations that are happening in the menu. And there's so many, the expectations of what good service is changing. And so I think when you look at what the guest experience is like, we need to remember a couple of things. First of all, you are only as good as your last experience. And if your last experience was really bad, you may fall out of their top 5 restaurants. And once you're out of that rotation, it is really hard to get back in.
Sure.
It's hard. It's really hard to earn a spot, and it's very high standards to keep that spot. So if that's the case, the second thing is you need to understand what that guest is feeling, what they're experiencing, because you're not talking to every single guest. You're not there with them, helping them to see their eyes when they take that first bite, because 40% of the food isn't being consumed on-prem. And even if it is, you're not there to see it. So that's part of the issue right now, is that the expectations have never been higher and visibility into how the guest is experiencing it has never been lower. And so honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love the guest feedback space, is because it's building that bridge. It's that connection between the guest and the restaurant in a way that brings it back to a mom and pop shop, but at scale. And that's, I think, the key, is like, how do you get that unreasonable hospitality at scale?
Well, and that's interesting too, because the winning back factor, it just, when your kids are dealing with things, anytime there's conflict or whatever, if that conflict is resolved in a manner that both people had a fight, they did whatever, but now they're buddies again. And they're more buddies now than ever. And I think there's a concept, that counterintuitive math of recovery, that the value of being able to get somebody that, just had a bad experience and have them back again will anchor them even more into the top 5.
Yeah, 100. And that's actually called, so there's the social side of things, but in the business side of things, it's called the service recovery paradox. And what the service recovery paradox is it states that a guest who has a negative experience and proper service recovery is more likely to be loyal than a guest who never had that service failure in the first place. So I thought this was a really interesting concept. There's a couple of PhD papers about it. I actually went back through our data and I said, how much more valuable is that guest? And when you compare recency, frequency, and spend of an unhappy guest who is then recovered, we find out that that guest spends 5 times more money with your location per year than the average guest.
Makes sense.
5 times more.
Huge.
And the value of, if you look at a guest who doesn't, a guest who has an unhappy experience where you don't respond to them, compared to a guest that's unhappy that you respond to, the difference is almost 15 times, right? So there's such a wide gap and all you have to do is care enough to respond. That's it. That's all the guest wants to do. They want to feel heard. They want to feel seen. And at that moment of emotion, you can either do 3 things. Number 1 is you could do nothing, and the chances of them coming back are super low. Number 2, you can try to argue with logic about why they didn't actually wait 20 minutes for their food, because you checked the ticket times and you looked at the cameras and you found out that it was actually only 7 minutes. Well, guess what, sir? You promise a quick meal And if it's 7 minutes and they were expecting 3 minutes, that's a really long time. It might not be 20, but it felt like 20. So you could do nothing. You can argue with facts or your own emotions and lose, or you can respond with empathy, with hospitality, and that guest has the opportunity to become your most loyal fan base. In fact, what we find is that not only do they spend 5 times more than your average guest, but they're 12 times more likely to leave you a 5-star review on a subsequent visit. They're more likely to place catering orders with you. They're more likely to talk to friends about you. They become your champion. And
Makes
you
sense.
think about it and you're like, the 30 seconds it takes to respond, or the swallow your pride for 30 seconds and then respond with 30 seconds, that will save you and make you so much money. And you know what's interesting, Bob? We actually did a study. We took a large customer and we picked a city and we picked locations that were, about doing the same revenue. They had, we picked area managers that picked about equal GMs, and so each area manager had a couple of locations. This is a large franchise, and so we let Ovation run for 4 months, right? Where they were able to hear how their guest was doing, recover the guests that were unhappy, fix issues in real time, solve underlying problems, get more 5-star reviews. And after 4 months, what we found was the difference in revenue between the stores that were using Ovation, the stores that were not using Ovation. Again, same city, same marketing, same area managers. They picked stores that were doing similar revenues beforehand, not like here's the railroad tracks left and right. Like we, picked them across the city. There was a 9% difference in revenue after 4 months, because you cannot improve your online reviews, resolve guest concerns, win back unhappy guests, fix underlying problems, and not increase your revenue. It's mathematically impossible to do that. And so that was one of the things that was a real eye-opener, because I looked at this as just a way to help improve operations and a way to connect with the guest. I didn't actually understand before this case study that we did a few years ago how much the revenue impact would be of improving the guest experience. And since then, we've repeated that and looked at different studies, and we found that there's about a 3 to 4 month lag of guest experience improvement to revenue. So your P&L is going to tell you where you're at. Your guest experience is going to tell you where you're going. And it's not just, is the guest experience going up, but it's, are you doing your part to recover those guests? Are you taking those 15 to 30 second moments to pause and to respond to that guest? And, one thing I will say about that's really interesting, the whole, all right, take a beat. You got a bad review. You got some bad feedback. Take a beat before you respond. What we find is that our AI, so we've been doing AI response and guest recovery now for over 2 years. And what we found is that because we've been, have such a giant data set, that we're actually 10% better. The AI is 10% better at recovering an unhappy guest than a human.
Huh.
Isn't that wild?
What is it the speed of response, the gentleness of it? What do you think that is?
So, let me get a little personal here. All right. So I have an amazing wife and we've got a great marriage. And like all great marriages, one of the things that we do is we disagree on things. So, we were having a bit of a disagreement on something, and we decided before we had this disagreement, she was going someplace else. We were going to 2 different spots, and we started to have a little bit of a disagreement, but then we went our separate ways because we had to each go do something else. And then she texted me and she said, "Are you mad at me?" And boy, right? So here's what I actually did. I went to AI and I said, okay, let me just tell you the things that are on my mind, because I feel like I'm being crazy right now. I shouldn't be frustrated at anything, but I am frustrated. How do I say this, respond to this text, right? Now, ChatGPT and I went back and forth for a little bit, and I just kind of I shared what I was feeling, and it was okay, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? It was kind of in a weird way, talking to a good friend, but I didn't have to feel like I was betraying the trust and airing my laundry to someone else. And I took the advice, and then I texted back in a way that I was able to communicate how I felt, but also acknowledge and ask questions to see how she was feeling. And I will tell you that because of that, like 5-minute conversation I had with ChatGPT, my text back to my wife was so much better. And it still was me. It still was my words. It's what I said. Is how I felt. But it was so much better than if I had just responded the way that I wanted to respond in that moment. And so that's the same exact principle for responding to negative reviews. If you get a negative review, your first response is frustration. And guess what? It should be, because every negative review is losing you 30 guests. Right? I mean, that negative review is costing you a lot of money. So if you're mad, it's justifiable. You should be. That person is
Exciting.
taking money from your business. Now, if you respond the way that you want to respond in the moment, it's probably not going to be extremely effective, right? But the AI is able to help craft a response, and our AI, while you're not going back and forth and sharing your feelings with the AI, what we've done is we look at millions of responses. Who is that guest? What's likely to get them back? And we're able to draft a response based on their specific concern and that we find is most likely to elicit a positive reaction from that guest. And so it takes the emotion out of it. So you don't have to respond with your frustration, and you click the button, and then if you want to tweak it, you can. But also you can make it in your own voice. You could put in your brand guidelines in there so it feels more like you, but it removes that initial emotional impact of getting that negative review and feeling like you just got sucker punched and you want to punch back. That's not the way that you win with hospitality.
No, it is. No, it is not. And it's so important getting the consumer to be in those 5 to get people to come back, because the numbers are staggering right now. It used to be that 70% of people try a restaurant one time, try a food place, what have you, and never come back again. Now that Red Onion's got all the data, now that Bickey's got all the data, it appears that's up to 82% of people that will visit your place and never, ever come back. And so, the retention game is so important. So, from your view of it, tell me a little bit about that.
In order to retain a guest, you got to know, was it a good experience for them? I mean, how often we think about this and traditional surveys, and let's go back to the whole reason that I started Ovation, which was that these traditional surveys are just not the way that guests communicate. I mean, Bob, every single thing, all those 2,000 points of success or failure in order to deliver the right food, the right place, the right person, the right temp. Every single one of those, we craft those perfectly to improve the guest experience. And then when it came down to, okay, well, let's measure that guest experience, we were relying on like 40 question surveys. Like, it just seemed bananas. And what happens is you just get such an unrepresentative portion of your guests to give you feedback. And that's the whole reason I started Ovation. I was like, man, there's got to be an easier way, a way to connect, a way to help them feel like something that's a little more human. And so if you're able to communicate with that guest and really get their take on what the experience was like, you're so much more likely to improve that retention. And one of the things that we always say is that there's value in the volume. And the goal is you want to get as many people as possible to share with you what their experience was, because that gives you the opportunity to recover the guests that didn't have a great experience. And interestingly enough, we find that a guest who is willing to say, I had a great experience, they actually are twice the value of your average guest. So if you just get a guest to say that they had a good experience, there's something that they have in them that is invested in your brand. And
Yes.
so the more people that you take, it's either going to be a recovery opportunity or a loyalty solidification. And that's the beauty of what we're talking about with retention, because yes, that number, we've seen the same thing where the number has gone from 30% to 20% of those guests that'll come back. And that is a lot of work that you're putting in to getting 20% of people to come back. And you want to know why they're not coming back?
Sure.
I bet you do. And so many people don't. And so the question, the principle is, ask. And we find that people are willing to share their experience. people are wanting to tell you about what happened, but they're not gonna take your 20 question survey. And and if they didn't have a great experience, what we find is that for every 1-star review you get, there were 26 people who had that same experience that didn't share it. And so if you're relying on online reviews, it's
Yeah.
too little too late by that point.
No, it's the same goes with, when if you don't have your media tracked to the end, to the purchase, to online, people are hit by it used to be 1,500 to 2,000 commercial impressions a day in the '70s, and now it's 5,000 to 10,000, and asking at the register where they heard you from. Number 1, they're annoyed by that type of ask. Secondly, they want their juicy patty, they want their pizza, they
Yeah.
want what have you on that. You
Well, and
said
I
earlier, though, that was really interesting, and it goes along with that old Ben Franklin story, and it's, you said that if they invest in saying good things about you, they're invested. And Ben Franklin used to have the thing that if you're moving into a new neighborhood, you ask the person a favor next door, they grant you a favor because of that transactional of favor granting, the neighbors like you more. And so that's so interesting that value proposition of getting somebody to say something good.
absolutely, and you see that again. I think a lot of this is human nature. And this is one of the things that we see all the time, and people often will conflate the fact that, hey, we're doing business. This is a business transaction. Yes, but you're doing business with humans. And humans are the same. I've had the privilege of going to 51 countries. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about traveling is seeing how similar everyone is. And I will tell you that from the back country of the middle of America to Ukraine to the villages in Africa to the mountain regions of Nepal, like I have seen the big cities in Central America, Australia. The universal human desire is the desire to feel important. And if you can help someone feel important, that is absolutely key. And that's really hospitality. It's like, how do I feel, right? Because hospitality is proving to the guest that you care about them. And if the guest is going to sit there and say, does this brand care about me? If they could come up with some examples off the top of their head saying, yeah, they care about me because, of this or that. Like, for example, there's a great company. I'm wearing one of their shirts. This is Forefathers. And the CEO personally emailed me to ask me about my buying experience. And it wasn't it wasn't anything that was like AI generated, because we actually had a conversation and he was like, hey, I'd love to hop on a phone call with you. And we
Nice.
did. And so that was something where it's like, why am I wearing the Forefathers shirt? Well, because I know that that guy cares about me. And guess what? We had
It's good looking too.
right? It's got these little like little donuts on it. I will tell you, there was a problem with my order. And guess what? I did. I reached out to the CEO and I let him know, because I'm invested, because I know that he cares about me, so I care about him. Even though I had a problem with my order, it got resolved. We figured it out. He personally attended to it. And now when I get on stage and I talk about Forefathers and I tell people where I got my shirts from, because I have a ton of shirts from them now, and I think about them not because everything went perfect, but because they cared. Now, I will tell you, if the same mistake had happened and the CEO hadn't put forth effort beforehand to show me that he cared, I would never have ordered from them again. I would have never told anyone about them. But I talk about them, and I do, because that's what matters. It's like you have to care about people. And when you are serving someone, there's something that happens that when you're serving someone, you start to love them. And you could see that's human nature. And again, we're in the human business. We're not in the food business. We're in the human business. And that's what it comes down to, is if that little principle of getting them to care about you and you proving that you care about them, that reciprocal relationship, that's how you build connection. And you can have, that first rung of loyalty is convenience. I'm going to try you out because you seem like it's cheap enough, you're close enough. I'm going to, the expectations are worth the effort, right? That next rung up is, and is all about consistency. So convenience, you'll get me in one time, maybe two times. Consistency, if I come in that second time and it's not the same as the first time, boom, you lost me.
Yeah.
If I come in 20 times and that 21st time it's inconsistent, guess what? Chances are high you're going to lose me for a while. I'm going to fall out of your fave 5. But here is the absolute key. There's convenience, there's consistency, and there's connection. And if you build connection with your guest, consistency occasionally can be forgiven. Convenience can be overcome. But unless you get there, you will only ever be one mistake away from being out of their top restaurants.
No, that's a high note of information to land on here at the end here, Zach. That's it. I really loved your point earlier about being in the human business, right? That's what brings that connection and connectivity and those matters. So to kind of close it out here, I've got a question, that's kind of directed to you to maybe help, people in this industry or getting in this industry or that type of thing. What would you, if somebody new getting out of college, getting into the restaurant business, the restaurant marketing business, the franchise business, what is your biggest tip for somebody that's entering this foray right now? What would be the one tip for success you'd give them?
Awesome. I would say care. You need to care about the success. And if you're hoping that the brand that you're buying into is going to do the work to make you successful, you should probably look at a different industry, right? The franchisees that I see that are incredibly successful work at it because they care. And if you care about your guest, if you care about the experience, and if you care about building something in your community that's worth standing next to, then you will be successful. And that's, I think the people that I've seen who have been unsuccessful in franchising have bought in expecting the brand to do all of the work for them. And there may be some that can do that successfully, but guess what? It's because they've built it to be that way. It's because they've built an entire infrastructure. They've got 150 locations. They've got an entire team. And at that point, they can take a step back and maybe care a little less and have it be passive. But it's really, you got to get so lucky if you're getting your first couple franchises to hope that it's going to work out. I mean, I've seen it happen, but I could count on one hand how many times it's happened.
No, that is such an important part of you're not signing up for an ATM machine. You're an entrepreneur. You got to get after it. So, Zach, thank you so much for taking part in this. This was so very, very interesting and really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome to be here, Bob, and always fun to chat with you, recorded or not.
Sounds good. Well, take care and have a great day.
Thank you.